only had insurance for two.
Yeah, but if you added a third car, you'd probably pay a higher premium. So I don't know what their premium is for this extra coverage, but they're going to have it.
Okay. And so what you're saying then is essentially, as it goes for their primary insurance, they're not going to have any more coverage. We don't know how much they're going to have to pay for the insurance, but the $375 million essentially is going to cover all three reactors.
Yes, ma'am.
For the primary.
It doesn't work like regular insurance. Nuclear insurance is a little different.
Okay. And then the secondary, which you're saying in the event of an accident or whatnot, that second layer doesn't kick in until nuclear material comes on the site for that reactor in particular?
No. The insurance wouldn't be necessary until they initially load the fuel into the reactor.
Yeah, we consider that then it becomes an operating reactor.
Right, that's the threshold that's important.
But they could have the fuel on site, and that's a different thing. But once they put it, they start to load the core, they're deemed an operating reactor.
Okay, but I guess then I'm not quite understanding. So what insurance are you talking about? That secondary level insurance is not necessary until they load the fuel?
Correct.
And what is the secondary level of insurance? I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Like I said, that can be found in 140.11. So when you look at what the total insurance package is, it's made out of two components, the primary insurance and the secondary insurance. The secondary insurance is a retrospective rating plan, which basically means that every licensee that's under this plan, which includes every operating reactor, a large nuclear power plant in the U.S., they all pay in the event of an emergency into a plan. So every single reactor is responsible for up to $121 million and up to about $19 million per year. So when you add all that together, the whole entire industry covered together, that's about 13.4 currently, and it fluctuates based on how many plants enter or leave the industry.
So in other words, I guess it depends if you have one reactor or two reactors on site too, is the amount of how much you are putting in annually to that fund.
In this case, every single reactor, regardless of how they're stationed on each site. So each one of those reactors on North Anna, each one of them is paying into the retrospective premium plan.
And how much is that?
Each one can pay up to about $19 million a year, up to a total of $121 million.
What makes the difference between the 19 and 121 million?
The 19 is the annual amount that they can be responsible for paying. The 121 is their total liability.
Their total liability. In other words, if there's an accident, Dominion would only be accountable for 121 million?
For each plant, yeah, so that would be times 3 because there's 3 plants on there. And then when you add in every single plant in the industry, so any incident that happens, potentially, every reactor would pay into that. So that's why I keep mentioning the $13.4 billion. So if something happened, every reactor is responsible for putting in a piece. It's kind of like they all share the risk.
But you get that $13.4 billion by adding up all the reactors that are putting in $19 million per reactor or something like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, per year, and then up to 121. So when you add up everybody's 121, that comes out to the 13.4. Correct.
Okay. Well, I guess there's going to be a problem, though, as all these reactors start closing down around the country. Won't that kind of shrink the amount of coverage?
Right. Price-Anderson does rely on the number of reactors in the industry. That's correct. And at that point, this is an act by Congress, so Congress would need to decide what to do if and when that amount dissipates.
Okay. So I think I've got a little bit clearer understanding. So basically, the part of the second layer, that's when Unit 3 does not have to become responsible for that monies until the fuel is loaded. That's the part you're talking about for that secondary part of loading the fuel.
That's exactly right, man. And that's because there's no inherent risk until that point.
Okay. Now I understand better. Okay.
And I apologize if I did a bad job explaining. There's what's called the Price-Anderson Act.
Right.
And that's where all this information is found. But if you want the really quick version, it is in 140.11 alpha 4.
Okay. No, I think you did a rather good job with that, even though I think 13.4 billion is chump change if you look at what happened in Fukushima, which is ongoing. So I definitely think that as it goes for insurance, I think those insurance policies probably need to be up, especially if we're going to put a new reactor on site with 2 other reactors that have had their design bases exceeded, and all 3 will be sitting on an ancient fault. So, I think there's a lot of risk involved there. But thank you very much for answering my questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Is there any other member of the public that has a question for the NRC?
David Martin.
Okay, what would you like to ask, Mr. Martin?
Which factors are used for Unit 3?
Can you state that again a little slower?
What specific risk factors are you using with Unit 3?
Risk factors?
What do you mean by risk factors, sir?
I'm talking about a major incident would happen if one at Unit 3.
We have a probability risk assessment that's included in our Chapter 19 evaluation that goes over all the types of design-based accidents. That's also in Chapter 15. We've already done those evaluations. I don't have the experts here to go into more specifics, but that type of information is looked at and evaluated for the different types of risks involved with accidents, or is there a particular probability risk based on the design. All that information has been addressed for this application. I can't really summarize it for you, but I can tell you where to go find it.
Where can I find this information?
If you look in chapters 15 and chapters 19 of the application in the staff safety evaluations on those chapters, you'll find the information you're looking for.
A major accident at North End, what is the total liability of the main people with these properties?
I think he's saying that, so if there's an accident at North Anna 3, when it becomes an operating plant?
Yes.
Sounds like they're covered up to 13, whatever the pool is, correct?
Right.
13-something billion?
The total liability, it's an industry plant, so their total liability would be $375 million plus whatever amount is in the secondary pool. And again, currently it's about 13.4
billion.
Really, that could exceed that amount, correct?
Potentially an accident could exceed that amount. So the way the Price-Anderson Act is written is after these funds would be exhausted, actually it's 15% of the primary layer. Once 50% is exhausted and if they're seeing that more money is required, Congress can start funding past that amount.
The people in the United States should in the correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Would you be stuck picking up the rest of the time, correct?
I don't know if that's a correct statement. That's pretty broad.
If I could seize your liability insurance, yes, we would be set up, correct?
He's saying, are the people of Virginia specifically stuck with any extra liability costs associated with it? But as you said, this would be a national issue at that point.
Right.
So I don't think it would. You're getting into a complex discussion about, state liability versus national liability. I don't really have the answer to that.
But the human's still going on. That's that liability insurance. So how can that something happen North End that's not achieve what you have, the men has now?
Well, Fukushima, those are some pretty old plants built back in, I believe, in the 50s. So these are new reactors, which are vastly safer than those older types of reactors. So, if that's any solace to you, we've had a lot of lessons learned from Fukushima itself, and that was they were hit by an earthquake, and then they didn't build their tsunami wall high enough. So,
If you would not be granting the men a second license.
I'm sorry?
If you did learn the license, you would not be granting license to year 3.
Well, North Anna, they're meeting all our regulations to build a new plant. I mean, we haven't made that decision yet, but that decision is going to be made within a year, and we're going to put our safety evaluation to our Atomic Safety Licensing Board, and then they're going to make a recommendation to our commission if they believe that a license to build and operate North Anna 3 is viable. We should let it go. We haven't made that decision yet, so.
So when do you think that termination would become?
The determination probably would be in about a year's time, according to our schedule. We should be this time next year. We should be pretty close to knowing if North Anna 3 is going to get a license or not.
What would happen if we had another earthquake at 5.8 or higher? What would guarantee this then?
In Virginia, near the plant?
Yeah, what plant? 5.8 up there.
If our staff felt that there was enough safety concern that North Anna would have to readdress something, but they've basically addressed their application to meet all our regulations and all the most current modeling that we expect for the central eastern United States to operate under. If there's an earthquake, will it shut down? Is it built structurally sound, etc. I mean, all that information to date has been addressed. And if a 5.8 earthquake came up, I don't think that we're going to not grant them a license. But, I don't know what's going to happen. So if safety concern, then we might not just look at North Anna. We might look at other plants, too. So what happens.
We put the whole region at risk for a nuclear accident, not just financially, but everybody in this area at risk.
There's inherent risk to building a nuclear power plant. We understand that, and that's why we have all the regulations. Make sure that it's done safely and that as much risk is mitigated as possible.
Are you using gold fever?
I'm sorry?
Gold fever. What gold fever means? The rushing the fertilizer.
Gold fever?
Gold fever.
I'm not sure I understand your analogy.
You're pushing this down people's throats.
Oh, the application?
Yes.
I mean, we have a process in place. So, we're just following our regulations, and they've submitted an application, and we're processing it.
I don't mean to butt in again. Excuse me, Mr. Udy. This is Erica. I did have another question because and hearing you and David speak, I caught something about the $375 million. If there was an accident, Dominion would be responsible for. Then there was some percentage put on that before that was exhausted. That the next thing would take place. So what was that about?
No. It's if basically that percentage was 15%. If and when Congress sees that 15% of the funds are exhausted, then they start considering whether or not more funding is necessary. That's all. There's no percentage.
15%. If 15% of the $375 million is used up, that's when it kicks into wondering if we need more money?
Correct.
So Dominion doesn't even have to spend that $375 million at first if there's an accident.
Well, Dominion wouldn't spend that money, ma'am. That's an insurance policy. The insurance company would pay for that. Okay,
gotcha. Well, the other thing I thought was very interesting is if right now, and not precluding that if more reactors close, there'll be less funds there. If right now you're saying there's $13.4 billion under the Price-Anderson Act, did I understand that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, North Anna 3 is predicted to cost $19 billion. So if the cost is going to exceed the insurance, that doesn't make sense.
I'm sorry, the cost for what, though? I think you might be confusing two different numbers.
No. It's been said that the cost of North Anna 3 is going to be $19 billion.
You mean to?
So if the cost is $19 billion, yet Price Anderson only has right now $13.4 billion, and Dominion only has insurance of $375 million, sounds like there is a shortage.
I think you're talking.
Can we put? We're going to put you on hold for a second, Ms.
Okay.
Gray.
Please do.
So I'm going to put. We're at headquarters. I'm going to put on hold so we can internally caucus to answer your question.
Okay, thank you.
Hold on. Hello, Ms. Gray. It's Mike Eady from NRC. We're back to resume the call.
Okay.
Okay. I think, Ms. Gray, you might be confusing two different numbers. The $19 million or $1 billion, I'm not certain, but I think you're referring to the cost to build the plant, not to the response for a potential incident.
Correct.
Right. So those two numbers don't correlate.
Well, I mean, if we build a $19 billion reactor there, not even considering the other two reactors that are there, but the insurance of an accident for under the Price-Anderson Act is only going to be the $13 billion. That doesn't cover the cost of building it. I mean, what am I missing? Am I missing something here?
Well, the insurance is to protect anybody who would be damaged by the accident. That's not to actually rebuild the plant. I believe that's a different type of insurance for a liability or risk.
Well, I need to know about that because it seems to me that, our rates are going to go up something like 25% if this project goes forward. And so all these monies collected ahead of time and whatnot, or when it starts, I mean, that's going to be a lot of money involved in the project, but then if something happens, well, it'll pay for damages, but that initial $19 billion is just like toast and burnt up. I mean, maybe I'm misunderstanding how exactly that process works, but it seems to me that $9 billion is not very much for a nuclear accident.
Again, ma'am, the 13.4 is for protection of the public, not to rebuild the plant. The rebuilding the plant is a business venture for the licensee. That's not insurance that we cover or concern ourselves with. That's a business venture.
But Dominion only has to have the $375 million, and that's just for damages to other people in the incident of an accident.
The primary.
The primary plus the secondary is used to protect the public. That's
what protects the public from paying for this project then?
No. To protect the public in the event of an emergency or any type of nuclear incident.
I know, but what I'm saying, though, is if Virginia invests all this money in building this reactor, besides obviously the people that get damaged or something during an accident, the project itself would be destroyed, and all that money would be lost. So, I mean, how do Virginians get repaid if there's an accident from all that money that was invested in a technology that put them at risk?
I mean, I think that's a question for your Public Service Commission for Virginia.
Okay. Well,
I don't remember who that is, but whoever's handling the Power Commission, I can find that for you, but I know that every state has their own commissions of people that look over the rates, etc. I think that's a question that's more appropriate at the state level.
Well, yeah, because just logically, if my house burns down, I'm going to get replacement costs for my house. If I injure people or something next door, my insurance is going to cover them. So I'm just wondering, it sounds to me that the Price Anderson Act, and the primary insurance is really just covering like for an accident, but doesn't really seem to be covering for the loss of a facility that the public has paid for.
Right, and again, the nuclear insurance is different from your regular insurance.
Okay. Well, Michael, if you find something out, let me know, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Martin, did you have any more questions?
I have a question. How many you have an accident including 1, 2, and 3? How much for insurance would that cover? I mean,
If you have current accidents,
all 3 of them.
if you have an accident at each plant,
Yeah.
same time?
Yeah, it works the same way, sir. The full price Anderson amount kicks in regardless of the plant, if there's 3 or 1.
That can really exceed the liability of the manpower, correct?
It's possible.
Are y'all figuring that in your statement?
Are we figuring out what, sir?
A major accident like it happening in North Anna.
Well, what we do is we apply the regulations and the Price-Anderson Act. A question like that would have to be written to your congressman. They're the ones that can change the law.
So something like that could happen, is that correct?
Could it happen? Hypothetically.
Yes, it could happen.
Yes, hypothetically.
If 1 and 2 are aging, rapidly aging, and you put in a at risk, a non-fault line, which doesn't make any sense.
Well, we do have programs, sir, that monitor the aging process. It's not necessarily unsafe.
Brooklyn is not.
Do you have any more questions specific for North Anna 3?
That's it for now.
Okay, well, thank you for your participation.
Thank
So
you.
we'll end the call. We thank everyone who participated on all sides. Thank you very much.
Thank you.